Hollywood may be the heart of American cinema, but its dollars are going overseas. Now Donald Trump wants to change that, with a 100% tariff on foreign-made films. And the surprising part, a major labor union is standing right behind him. Former President Donald Trump is reportedly considering a 100% tariff on films produced outside the United States, a bold protectionist move aimed at reshoring America's film industry. This proposed tariff signals a dramatic pivot in trade policy toward the entertainment sector, traditionally seen as culturally symbolic but now positioned as an economic battleground. While Trump has previously targeted sectors like steel, autos, and semiconductors, this move extends the America First doctrine deep into creative industries, raising questions about the role of government in shaping cultural and economic output. Critics warn that such a sweeping tariff could disrupt global distribution chains and inflame trade tensions, while supporters frame it as long overdue pressure on studios that have long offshored production to cut costs. But Trump isn't the only one backing this unprecedented move. A major labor union is stepping into the spotlight. In an unexpected show of support, the Teamsters Union, led by President Sean O'Brien, has publicly endorsed Donald Trump's proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films. This endorsement marks a rare moment of alignment between organized labor and a Republican policy, particularly in a sector long dominated by liberal-leaning institutions like Hollywood. O'Brien's support reflects rising frustration among U.S. film workers over offshore production trends that have drained jobs from domestic crews. By backing the tariff, Teamsters are signaling that economic security for workers now outweighs political lines. This stance could open the door to new bipartisan alliances focused on reshoring jobs, a political wildcard heading into an election season where Labour votes may prove decisive. But what's in it for American workers? O'Brien says, everything. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has positioned Donald Trump's proposed film tariff not as a political stunt, but as a necessary economic intervention to protect American labor. In his remarks, O'Brien argued that the 100% tariff would offer concrete and immediate benefits to U.S. film workers, many of whom remain unemployed or underemployed after months of industry disruption. He emphasized that decades of Hollywood's cost-cutting have come at a steep price. Steady job loss for domestic film crews, including set designers, grips, editors, and production assistants. As studios shifted production to cheaper markets overseas, wages stagnated and project pipelines dried up for American workers. O'Brien framed the tariff as a strategic lever to rebalance bargaining power, forcing studios to weigh the true cost of offshoring. In his view, tariffs won't just protect jobs, they will rebuild an industry infrastructure that unions argue has been hollowed out by decades of globalization. Critics have warned that such a policy could backfire, raising costs for consumers. But O'Brien pushed back, stating that corporate profits, not working-class wages, should take the hit. His argument taps into a broader post-pandemic narrative. Economic recovery must include structural reform, not just surface-level growth. So who's to blame for the job drain? According to Teamsters, it's Hollywood's addiction to cheap outsourcing. According to the Teamsters Union, Hollywood isn't just using outsourcing, it's addicted to it. In one of their most forceful critiques yet, the union accuses major film studios of prioritizing cost-cutting at the expense of American labor, relying heavily on cheaper foreign production to preserve profit margins. President Sean O'Brien criticized studios for what he called a chronic dependency on overseas shoots, tax credits, and non-union labor, a business model that has systematically undermined job security for domestic crews. From lighting technicians to transportation workers, thousands of skilled professionals have seen local opportunities evaporate. This pattern, Teamsters argue, has not only weakened the U.S. film labor market, but also degraded Hollywood's creative infrastructure, forcing American workers into precarious, short-term gigs, while foreign markets reap the long-term industrial gains. The union's language, addiction, signals a shift from negotiation to confrontation. They contend that unless studios are forced to re-evaluate their offshoring strategy, the US risks ceding both its cultural influence and employment base to foreign economies. And what makes this stance even more shocking? It's only the second time in history the Teamsters have backed a Republican plan. For only the second time in its storied history, the Teamsters Union has openly supported a policy put forward by a Republican president, a highly unusual move that underscores growing economic frustration over party loyalty. Historically aligned with the Democratic Party, labor unions like the Teamsters have typically clashed with Republican administrations over worker protections, collective bargaining, and industrial policy. But this endorsement reveals a tectonic shift. When it comes to American jobs, economic nationalism is starting to trump partisanship. By backing Trump's tariff on foreign-made films, the Teamsters are signaling that their agenda is increasingly results-driven, not ideology-bound. It's a move that could reshape the electoral calculus, especially in key swing states where union support remains politically decisive. This rare endorsement raises a bigger question. Are labor unions recalibrating their political alliances to reflect global economic realities rather than legacy affiliations? And O'Brien isn't stopping there. He's calling for a bipartisan alliance to protect American jobs. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has called for bipartisan cooperation as essential to reviving and protecting the interests of American workers, a pointed appeal that cuts through today's hyper-partisan political climate. He argues that economic security and job creation should not be partisan issues, and that both parties must come together to address the structural erosion of domestic industries, especially in sectors like film, where globalization has stripped away high-paying, skilled jobs. O'Brien's message reflects a growing reality in labor politics. Traditional alliances are weakening, and workers' demands now transcend party lines. With inflation, automation, and outsourcing all hitting American labor simultaneously, unions are pushing lawmakers to prioritize policies over party loyalty. This bipartisan framing could influence both legislative dynamics and electoral outcomes, particularly as labor-heavy swing states grow more unpredictable in future elections. And the urgency is real. Thousands of unionized film workers are still out of work. The Teamsters Union represents over 500,000 workers, including a substantial share of the US film and television labor force, from drivers and crew members to logistics and technical teams. But months after the 2023 Hollywood strikes were resolved, many of these workers still haven't returned to work. The union warns that while contracts have been signed and actors are back on screen, below-the-line labor remains underutilized, facing production delays, reduced budgets, and continued outsourcing, a silent recession for the working class in Hollywood. According to Teamsters leadership, this stagnation underscores a deeper issue: the US film industry's structural reliance on global supply chains and non-union labor, which continues to displace American jobs even after domestic labor disputes are resolved. The result is a fragile recovery, one that favors capital over labor and foreign economies over US workers. Unless reshoring is incentivized, many union members may find the end of the strike was only the beginning of unemployment. So why are studios still filming abroad? The answer lies in global incentives and cheaper costs. Despite America's deep creative infrastructure, Hollywood studios continue to shift film production abroad, lured by lower costs and aggressive tax incentives from foreign governments. Countries like France, Canada, the UK, and Australia have built competitive film industries by offering rebates, subsidies, and streamlined permitting. These financial advantages have created a global film economy where studios optimize for margin over geography, often bypassing unionized US labor markets in favor of more flexible and cheaper overseas options. France, for instance, offers a 30% tax credit on eligible production costs, plus additional bonuses for shooting outside Paris or employing French talent. Similar schemes in Georgia, EU, British Columbia, Canada, and New South Wales, Australia, have made these regions reliable stand-ins for American cities, at a fraction of the cost. While beneficial to foreign economies, these incentives hollow out the US labor base, prompting unions like the Teamsters to argue that federal policy must counteract this outsourcing trend or risk permanent job flight. But won't tariffs just make movies more expensive for consumers? O'Brien has a sharp answer for that.
Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has pushed back against criticism that Trump's proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films would lead to higher prices for moviegoers. Instead, he argues, studios should absorb the cost increases by cutting into their profit margins, not by shifting the burden onto consumers. This argument goes straight to the core of the post-pandemic entertainment economy, where media conglomerates have posted record revenues even as labor unrest and production delays continue. O'Brien contends that these firms have the financial cushion to adapt without penalizing the public. Analysts note that the average cost of film production has already ballooned in recent years, driven more by marketing budgets and executive compensation than by labor or tariffs. In this context, asking studios to accept slimmer margins could be seen as a long overdue correction, not a threat. O'Brien's stance reinforces a broader labor message. Working-class jobs shouldn't be sacrificed to protect shareholder returns, especially in industries that rely on cultural output and public trust. And it's not just union leaders saying it. Even conservative actors are backing Trump's plan. Conservative actor and filmmaker Kirk Cameron has voiced support for Trump's proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films, calling it an idea that goes beyond the usual political boundaries. Cameron's endorsement is significant not because of his box office power, but because it highlights a growing ideological crossover. Cultural conservatives and labor unions, often on opposite sides of political debates, are now aligned on reshoring American film production. This alignment signals that economic nationalism is becoming a cross-cutting force, able to bridge constituencies that rarely agree, from Christian conservatives focused on cultural sovereignty to union leaders focused on job security. By calling the idea outside the mold, Cameron may be amplifying what political strategists see as a broader realignment in post-pandemic economic discourse, one where restoring domestic industries is no longer a partisan idea, but a populist imperative. But for critics like O'Brien, Hollywood's dependence on outsourcing has gone from business decision to creative hypocrisy. Teamsters. President Sean O'Brien highlighted a striking example of Hollywood's offshoring trend, a big-budget film about an earthquake in California, filmed entirely in Australia. The example underscores a deeper criticism from labor leaders, that Hollywood is now so financially tied to global production incentives that even stories rooted in American identity are no longer made on American soil. From a creative standpoint, this outsourcing raises questions of authenticity and narrative integrity. But for the Teamsters, the bigger concern is economic. Every offshore shoot means fewer jobs for U.S. workers and more capital flowing into foreign economies. This reliance on global production infrastructure reveals how Hollywood's business model has shifted from location-based storytelling to cost-based logistics, optimizing tax credits and exchange rates instead of investing in domestic creative ecosystems. As O'Brien's example suggests, the issue is no longer just about lost jobs. It's about how much of America is left in American-made films. And it's not just about where films are shot. It's about what Hollywood values: creativity or profits?
Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has leveled a sharp critique at Hollywood's current business model, accusing studios of shifting their focus away from creative innovation and toward profit maximization. According to O'Brien, storytelling and originality have taken a backseat, while studio executives increasingly favor content strategies driven by franchises, low-risk formats, and international market appeal, often at the expense of labor and authenticity. This profit-first approach, he argues, not only undermines American creative leadership, but also accelerates the outsourcing trend. As production is increasingly dictated by cost efficiency, not artistic intent. In a media landscape dominated by streaming wars and quarterly earnings, O'Brien's criticism taps into a larger debate. Is Hollywood still a creative powerhouse, or just another globalized industry chasing margins? That's why O'Brien wants tariffs, not just as punishment, but as a wake-up call to bring production back home. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien is not framing tariffs as punishment, but as policy leverage. He argues that a 100% tariff on foreign-made films is necessary to compel Hollywood studios to relocate production back to the US, after decades of offshoring driven by cost and tax arbitrage. In O'Brien's view, the American film industry has become so globalized and so profit-obsessed that only direct economic pressure can reverse the trend. Voluntary reshoring has failed, he says, because studios are not incentivized to sacrifice margin for national or labor interests. The proposed tariff would act as a counterweight to foreign subsidies and tax credits, leveling the playing field by making outsourcing less attractive and reshoring comparatively more viable for budget-conscious producers. For unions like the Teamsters, tariffs are not just about economics. They're about strategic reindustrialization, restoring lost infrastructure, stabilizing employment, and rebuilding an industry that, in their view, has drifted too far from its roots. And the union isn't just talking. Teamsters say they're ready to organize, mobilize, and rebuild Hollywood from the ground up. The Teamsters Union has pledged full support, not just in words, but in coordinated action, to restore domestic employment across the US film and television industry. In response to years of offshoring and automation, the union is positioning itself as a central force in reshoring production, negotiating labor agreements, organizing workforce training, and collaborating with policymakers to re-anchor the industry on American soil. Teamsters leadership has emphasized that labor can no longer be reactive. It must be proactive in shaping the future of work, particularly in sectors like media, where technological disruption and global outsourcing have destabilized traditional employment paths. This pledge signals a broader economic message. If public policy shifts, labor is ready. But rebuilding the US entertainment workforce will require more than rhetoric. It demands investment, coordination, and long-term commitment. But can labor unity overcome political tribalism? O'Brien says the real enemy isn't a party, it's inaction. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has taken aim at Democratic lawmakers, accusing them of rejecting former President Trump's film tariff proposal not on policy grounds, but due to personal and partisan bias. In his remarks, O'Brien warned that reflexive opposition to anything associated with Trump risks obstructing policies that could meaningfully restore American jobs, particularly in sectors like film, where bipartisan action is urgently needed. By calling for unity across party lines, O'Brien is emphasizing a broader shift in labor politics. Economic nationalism is no longer the exclusive domain of the right. For unions, the priority is not who proposes a solution, but whether it serves working Americans. His appeal challenges both parties to re-evaluate their positions. Can domestic production become a post-partisan priority, or will political tribalism continue to block industrial reform? In the end, it's not about Trump. It's not about Hollywood. It's about whether America still knows how to make things, including movies, at home.